Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Today I wanted to talk about astrological ascent of the soul. So, what is the path of spiritual growth? What is the archetypal path of the various stages of enlightenment, or our pathway towards Gnosis or towards the divine in the Western mystery tradition? So, of course, there is no one way of doing things in the Western Esoteric Tradition. There are many different paths. There is Rosicrucianism, there is the Qabalah, there are many different traditions. But there does seem to be a specific model of ascension that is at the very heart of the Western Esoteric Tradition. And this can be found within the Qabalistic Tree of Life. It could be found within the Ptolemaic model of the universe. Of course, I'm referring to Ptolemy, the famous astrologer from late antiquity. This astrological ascent of the soul is at the very heart of the Hermetic tradition. You find this described in detail in the very first text of the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a collection of wisdom literature from Alexandrian Egypt, Hellenistic Egypt, dating from around the 1st to 5th centuries of our Common Era. So within the Corpus Hermeticum, within the book The Pymander, it describes an astrological ascent of the soul through the celestial bodies. You see this hinted at even in Plato in his Republic, at the very end of his Republic, in the myth of Aridaeus. It hints at this astrological ascension. You see it in the Roman poet and philosopher Cicero, in his book De Republica, in the Dream of Scipio. This concept. So this idea that our way of the soul ascending through the various levels is through ascent through the 7 ancient planets, the 7 ancient astrological bodies. You see this concept found within Gnostic treatises and texts. So you see it within Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Greek thought and philosophy. You see it in the Qabalah, because the Tree of Life shows this ascension from Malkut, which is earth or physical world, to Yesod, which is the moon, to Hod, Mercury, Netzach, Venus, Tiferet, the sun, Gebra, Mars, Chesed, Jupiter, Binah, Saturn, and then on to Chokmah, which is the zodiac, and on to Keter, which is the first movement or first whirling. So you see it in the Qabalah, Gnosticism, Hermetic texts. You see this as a very ancient concept of this astrological ascension. If you look at Mithraism, the cult of Mithras, the cult of Mithras was a secret society and a fraternal organization that was very popular in the Roman Empire. Around 2,000 years ago, the cult of Mithras. In Mithraism, you had 7 different stages of initiation. And the 7 levels of initiation of Mithraism was assigned to the 7 astrological planets. So you see this in Mithraism, Qabalah, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, all these different traditions. You see these 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. Now, this concept of celestial ascent is assigned to the 7 heavenly bodies that could be seen with the naked eye in the night sky, or that the ancients were apparently aware of. However, even in modern astrology, where you include Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, these planetary bodies, of course, some would say, well, this planet is a dwarf planet, or whatever people want to say, or how they want to reclassify things. These are actually, in modern astrology, seen to be the higher octaves of the first 7. So that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. Pluto is a higher octave of Mars. Neptune is seen as a higher octave of Venus. So even with modern astrology, it still goes back to the primary 7, which would include the moon. So the ancient conception of planet really just meant heavenly body, okay? So there were these 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. Now, you can do with this as you will. If you think that this is true, if you think that this is not really valid to you, you know, we are scouring ancient temples, so to speak. We're going over the knowledge of the ancients, and it's for each individual to think for his or herself. I encourage people to come to their own conclusions on these things, but this concept of celestial ascension, it's hinted at in Dante's Divine Comedy, in his Paradiso. It's found within the Merkava tradition. It's found in the Qabalah. It's found in the Corpus Hermeticum, the very first text of the Corpus Hermeticum, where it describes how the soul of man was a divine being that fell through the 7 celestial bodies, 7 levels, and came into incarnation and matter. And that our way of ascension is by going back up through these levels. Like I said, in the Qabalah, you know, we go from Malkut to Yesod, and on to Hod, Netzach, Tiferet, Geburah, Chesed, and Binah. So we ascend through these various levels. And there are more levels beyond that. You see this in the Gnostic treatise on the 8th and the 9th. Okay? You see this concept. So where does this all come from? To be quite honest, we don't know. Most of the ancient mystery teachings in ancient times were secret. You had oaths of secrecy. So, and they were very good about keeping their oaths of secrecy. So we really have no idea how ancient this goes. Really, the furthest back that we can go to written records is to the Sumerian and the Phoenician alphabet. Sumerian cuneiform writing, Phoenician, Egyptian hieroglyphics, which these are the earliest forms of writing: Phoenician, Sumerian cuneiform, and then Egyptian hieroglyphics after that. So these written records, that is, written history is really not all that old. So basically, we do see in Babylon and Sumer this deification, so to speak, of astrological bodies and different forms of astral magic. Did they, in fact, work with a planetary ascension of the soul, as in different levels, like the tiered ziggurat of ascension? We don't really know. Is this actually part of, these ancient practices? We don't know. But what we do know is that around 2,000 years ago, these ideas were pretty popular in Gnostic and Hermetic tradition. And then again, like I said, you see it in Kabbalistic thought and everything else. You see it in Mithraism. So basically, we have these different levels of ascension. And this is still relevant today in many of our modern traditions of magic. For example, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn has you pass through the elemental grades of the outer order of the Golden Dawn, through the inner order or Rosicrucian order, on up through those grades, and supposedly on up into the third order. And again, this follows the Qabalistic Tree of Life. You begin technically outside the temple, so to speak, and then into Malkut as a zealoter. Okay, start off in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, outside the temple, so to speak, as a neophyte. Then as a zealoter in Malkut, and then on to Theoricus, into Yesod, which is lunar, and then on into Practicus of Mercury, and then on and hold on into Philosophus, which is Venus, and Netzach, and then on into the second order of Tiferet as an Adeptus Minor, and then in the second order to Adeptus Major and Geber and Mars, Adeptus Exemptus in Chesed or Jupiter, and then on into the third order through those grades. In the AA system of initiation, I personally have followed the Golden Dawn, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn system. I was in 2 different orders of that. Now I also work with the AA. I'm now a member of the AA system. It follows very much the same astrological map with different names of the grades. Probationer is outside the temple, neophyte is Malkut, zealoter is Yesod in the moon, and then on to Practicus, Philosophus, Adeptus Minor, Adeptus Major, Adeptus Exemptus, crossing the abyss to Magister Templi, Magus, and then Ipsissimus. So basically, and I've always worked with kind of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn type of tradition. It's always been part of my personal path. Although I don't really talk about my path that often because I want my videos to be unbiased. I want to talk about all ideas and basically you come up with your own conclusion. But you see this concept at the very heart of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and derivative traditions. Of course, this is not exactly explicitly centering around the planetary ascent. It still exists because you're ascending through the Tree of Life. So this really, how could this be adapted? How could people work with this? Well, if you get into ceremonial magic, you could progressively work through the different planets and you can initiate yourself or gradually work from level to level, working with different planetary spirits as you ascend up. So if you want to take that approach, you can begin, of course, in Earth, focusing on, let's say, nature and the material, because it's good to have a solid foundation. And then you could start working with the lunar sphere and lunar spirits and lunar forces and magic. And then work yourself up to get initiated into Mercury and then Venus and on up. So you could progressively work with the various planetary spirits and forces and learn to harness those forces both within and without. So if you want to take the individual approach where you kind of self-initiate, you could progressively bring yourself to working with these forces in succession. And then, of course, the Enochian tradition, or Enochian, as many people pronounce it. The Enochian tradition of John Dee and Edward Kelly, this could also, you could successively work through these in, like, let's say, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, AA perspective. First of all, you have the watchtowers. So in Earth, you have the Northern Watchtower, and then on up into, like, let's say, Yesod, the Eastern Tablet, into Hod, the Western Tablet, and then on into Netzach, the South Tablet, Tablet of Union, moving into Tiferet, and then also working with the Heptarchia, the Heptarchy, and the various 49 good angels in the Enochian system, working with the kings, princes, and governors or ministers of the different astrological bodies, and also scrying on the aethers. There are different ways to map this onto the Tree of Life, onto the path of ascension. What I personally would do is I would do, if you're doing like the 10 level system, I personally would do 3 per level, so that 3 in the material sphere, 3 in Yesod, on and on, so that you gradually work through the 30 aethers as you ascend, going into progressively subtler levels. I encourage you to experiment and do your own thing. That's my own perspective. The 49, the Book of Logeth, or the 49 Gates of Understanding, working with that system, I personally, since it's associated, the 49 Gates of Understanding, with Binah, to me that would be a crossing of the abyss. But, you know, that is just my own personal take on how you can graph and gradually work through the Enochian system in this type of a system. That is how I personally would view integrating the Enochian system into this ascent and gradually working your way through the system. So that is one possible way to do it. Another magical text that is really in some ways unpopular in the occult community. Many people view the text as spurious or something that's silly, but even though the history behind it is probably spurious, I personally find the ritual outline of the Simon Necronomicon to be very valid, because the model that it uses, the purification periods, the various ritual formulae, are based upon the older grimoire tradition. So you can work with this within the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn method of ascent. You can work with this in, like, say, the AA. You could just self-initiate by progressively working through the different planetary spheres. There are many different ways that you can work with this. You could even work with this in an Enochian framework. So there are many different frameworks you could use. Qabalistic. There are many different modalities. Let's say that you're pagan. You could successively work with the pagan deities and ask them for their insight to infuse you. You could come up with your own sort of initiation rituals. However, my own personal advice would be to work through this slowly. The whole path of ascension of the soul to the divine from the beginning to end should not last in a week. This is the pathway to reaching, this is said to be the path of ascent. This is supposed to map our spiritual journey. One's entire spiritual journey should probably you should probably do a ritual and then rest for a while. Do a ritual and rest for a while. So it's something you should take your time on, and really try to internalize. And then this is also found within the alchemical the 7 alchemical metals ascribed to the 7 astrological planets, the different stages of alchemy. And then also you have within the first 4 levels, you have solid, liquid, and gas. And beyond that plasma, you have a gradual rarefication, okay, from the more solid to the more subtle. And you also find how you have the elemental grades of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or whatever, where you move from solid, then to liquid, gas, and on and on. Although actually the elemental qualities are switched a little bit, with Yesod being airy and Hod or Mercury being watery, but whatever the case may be, this is basically what I'm saying is that these 7 levels of initiation, the ascent of the soul through the 7 levels, could be found in Dante's Divine Comedy, the 7 heavens, so to speak. You could see it within Islamic tradition and Muhammad's Hajj through the 7 heavens. You see it within the Merkaba tradition. If you look at the Qabalistic Tree of Life, you're ascending through the 7 celestial spheres. You see it in Plato's Republic at the very end, the myth of Iridaeus hinted at. You see it in Cicero's De Republica, the dream of Scipio. You see it in Gnostic treatises. And again, the very first text of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Poimander, talks about our celestial ascent. So basically, this is at the very heart of the Western Esoteric Tradition. And again, it's found in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's found within the AA system. So what I'm saying is basically there are many ways that you can adapt these levels of initiation. There are many ways that you can adapt this for your own path. You could take the Kabbalistic approach. You can join a magical order like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or the AA. You could use an Enochian framework with the Watchtowers and the Heptarchy and the Book of Logeth. There are many different approaches that you could actually take with this. And again, even though the occult community and popular opinion seems to spur these books as being BS or unhistorical, whatever, or somehow dark and scary, whatever the case may be, I still think that the method outlined, the basic ritual outline of walking the gates of the Necronomicon, again, this is not something to toy with. I have heard horror stories of people that unprepared just started like trying to walk the gates. So, if something is somehow BS, then whatever, that's what some people think. But I have heard horror stories of people trying to walk the gates of the Necronomicon unprepared. As much as people try to have shortcuts in modern magic, I personally think that the purification periods, the preparation, the inner purifications, the period of abstinence, the fasting. All of these things exist in ancient grimoires for a reason. But basically, I think that with the proper preparations that it describes, I think that the basic ritual outline in there should give you a basic model for how you can ceremonially ascend through these gates, or ascend through these astrological spheres. So you see this in Hermeticism, alchemy, magic, and all of this. So let's look a little deeper at the process. First, the first level in the Kabbalistic tradition is Malkut, which is earth. It is the physical. It is everyday material reality. This is step one in the Qabalah. So before you ascend to the lunar sphere or the higher levels, you need to be grounded in earth. In the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I have been part of, there is the saying, unless Adonai build the house, it will crumble and it will fall. Adonai being the name of the divine applied to Malkut. And again, there's the parable of the man who built the house on the beach and his house washed away. The man who built his house upon a solid rock, his house remained. And again, Pietra or Peter, Pietra means rock, the foundation of the church or whatever. I think it's important to have your feet planted on the ground. So I think this is important. So before you start, ascending up here, I think it's important to be grounded in your everyday physical reality. It could be very easy to get lost. I think that it's important to be grounded, okay? Grounding is very important. And also, I think it's a good idea, before you try to master the subtler aspects of yourself, to try to master your own physical body. I personally think it's a good idea to try to work on your physical appetites. Learn to govern, to master yourself. These are the two horses of the chariot card, learning to tame your own passions, learning to tame your mind and your emotions, learning to tame these aspects of yourself so that you, the charioteer, govern your own inner forces. So I think that first it's a good idea to learn to control your hunger, or learn to control your appetites, learn to control your sexual appetites, not repress, it's good to express these things, but learn to direct your own inner forces. So that before you start trying to direct these higher, subtler things, you need to learn to control your own gut when it's growling, when you're craving a cheeseburger or something. If you can't control your own material impulses, then, I think that should be the first level, is start with the physical, okay? Is my own personal view. Now, what is the next level, or really the first astrological ascent, would be the lunar sphere. This is often interpreted as being the realm of the unconscious mind. So that working with the lunar sphere could be working with the unconscious. This could be done through dreams. It could be done through ink blots, like the psychiatrists, the ink blots, and using ink blots. It could be used by working with symbols, astral travel, and astral projection, so that really you're trying to make the unconscious conscious. And if you get into the whole Jungian individuation process of Carl Gustav Jung, this is the beginning of the Jungian process, beginning to work with the shadow, beginning to work with our own unconscious minds. So when working with the lunar sphere, you're starting to access your own subconscious. You're starting to stir things up, starting to bring stuff up from your own subconscious mind. And you're developing a two-way communication between the conscious and subconscious minds. This is the lunar sphere. So learn to delve into your own unconscious. Again, I would keep a dream diary. when you're working in the lunar sphere, I would begin this process of keeping a dream diary, analyzing your dreams, looking for symbols, because the language of the unconscious is symbol. Again, ink blots, things like that. Astral projection, astral projection and the AA system is seen, it's practiced as a neophyte in Malkuth, but it's a way to begin getting access to the higher sphere of Yesod so that you can then proceed on to the next level. And then in the realm of Hod or Mercury, you can learn to master your own mind, to be able to focus thought, to be able to completely master this aspect of yourself. And this kind of goes in with, before you master external forces, you master yourself. Or, according to the Hermetic adage of Hermes Trismegistus of the Emerald Tablet, as above, so below, as below, so above, or as within, so without, that the macrocosm, the external, is a reflection of the microcosm, the individual, internal, and the microcosm, the internal, is also a reflection of the external, macrocosm. Within and without, these feed on one another. So that as you learn to direct these inner forces, you also learn to direct the external planetary forces, and also working with the spirits of ceremonial magic and all of these type of things if you get into that. So not just, learning to command Mercury forces. Instead, you're learning to control your own mind at the same time. Again, internal and external. So the sphere of Mercury, on into the sphere of Venus, I would learn to control my passions. Not to repress. There is a big difference between totally blocking off and repressing and learning to control. Okay? Learn to control your own passions and your sexual impulses. Learn to control and to direct the subtler elements of your own being. And you'll be able also to direct the planetary forces of Venus. And again, at the first text of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Poimander talks about, as the soul ascends, that we are having these internal movement and development as well. So it is seen this way in the Poimander of working upon your own inner self as well. And then on into the sphere of Tiferet, or the sun. This is seen as the higher self, the higher divine self, or you could say knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel. This is, so after you have mastered, putting into theosophical terms, or pseudo-Eastern theosophical terms, you have physical, astral, mental, then you have spiritual. So physical, Malkuth, astral, Yesod, mental or causal, Hod, and then then you have your passions in this level, in this process, and then you have your spiritual. So you gradually move, just like you move from solid, liquid, gas to plasma. You start at the more concrete and the subtler levels and dimensions. You learn to control your body. Then you learn to gain access to and unleash the powers of gradually subtler aspects of being. And on up. So that I encourage you to come up with your own process, Don't just base everything on my view or other people's views. Come up with your own conclusion. But basically, this is seen as a process of initiation. This is very ancient, very old. We don't know how old this concept really is. But it is at the very heart of the Western Esoteric Tradition and draws from Greek, Babylonian, and probably Egyptian thought of the ascent of the soul. But anyways, and again, this is at the very heart of ritual magic and everything else. But anyways, I just wanted to give a brief look and a brief introduction to this planetary ascension. Also, I encourage you to look this up. Look up Celestial Ascent or Astrological Ascent of the Soul. Look it up for yourself. So after you watch this video, see what other people have to say. Go type it into Google, type it into YouTube. See what other people have to say about Celestial Ascent of the Soul. So come to your own conclusions. You listen to me, now listen to what others have to say as well. This is my personal path. People often ask me, Taliesin, what's your own pathway of initiation? This is it. I personally follow the Hermetic, Qabalistic. I follow the Astrological Ascent of the Soul. This is my own path, which I'm sharing with you, and the pathway of many other occultists and people and seekers follow this model. So I just wanted to briefly outline a very broad looking at different traditions and different approaches so that you can come to your own conclusion and all of that. But surprisingly, you don't hear about this very often. Even though this is like at the heart of our Western Esoteric Tradition, you don't hear about this very much. But that is just a basic rundown. Quick announcement. I got my Facebook page back. So I did make a video before on how I had my old Facebook page taken down. I was trying to make a new one. I have access to that again, so that is fixed. It is resolved. If you're on Facebook, be sure and look up Taliesin McKnight, and you'll have access to my personal my Facebook page. If you want to support my work, then be sure and click my Patreon account. If you want to support the work that I do, then go to my Patreon. And just a reminder, new videos come out every Saturday morning, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone.